This is Alice. Alice is known for a few characteristics of hers. Namely, for one, she's passionate about animal rights. She's very politically interested and active. She's an active supporter of various political organizations. And she's also known for her voluntary work. Now, I will ask you a question about Alice, and we will answer this together using propositional logic in the course of this video. What is more likely? Option A, Alice works at a bank. Or option B, Alice is in some kind of political or animal activist group and works at a bank. So now let's talk about propositional logic. But first, if you enjoyed the video, please leave us a like. We are a small channel and we are really happy about any support we get. So in order to get started with propositional logic, let's first define what we mean when we say proposition. A proposition is any statement which can usually uniquely be assigned with a truth value. Truth value we mean true or false. Let's look at a few examples together. First example is the proposition 12 is divisible by 3. We know that 12 divided by 3 is 4, so this is a true statement. Second example, 5 is smaller than 2. We know that 5 is not smaller than 2 because 2 plus 3 equals 5. So this is a false proposition. Third example, red is a nice color. Maybe true for some people, maybe false for other people, but in the mathematical sense this is not a proposition. So here the answer is not applicable. And the fourth example is also why we wrote usually in the definition above. It's the sentence, this statement is false. It's a paradoxical statement since when the sentence is true, then the truth value would be false and vice versa. So here we cannot assign a truth value and so it's undefined or neither. So in order to answer the question we asked in the beginning of the video, let's now look at combinations of propositions. This is only a brief covering of the topic. We will talk about it more deeply in future videos. So if this is a little fast, just relax. We will look at it in future videos in more details and then you will understand it more clearly. Let's just assume two propositions A and B. They can be either true or false. Now we will draw a truth table including all possible truth values for A and B. And based on this, we will also conclude the truth values of the combinations A and B and A or B, respectively. So first of all, A can be true and B can also be true. A second possible combination is that A is true and B is false. It is also possible for A to be false and B to be true. And last but not least, it is also possible for A to be false and B to be false. So now let's look at the combination A or B. In order for A or B to be true, either A or B or both of them have to be true. So we can now conclude the truth value of A or B based on the truth values we assigned in the first two columns. So if A is true and B is true, A or B is definitely also true. If A is true and B is false, A or B is still true because A is true. Same logic applies to the third example. And if A is false and B is false, then A or B is also false since none of both is true. Now let's look at the proposition A and B. In order for A and B to be true, both A and B need to be true individually. So this is only true if both A and B are true, and in all other cases this combination of propositions is false. Now let's come back to our example from the introduction and apply the logic that the proposition A is Alice works at a bank and B is that Alice is in an activist group. Now we can go back to the truth table and see that in order for Alice to be in an activist group and work in a bank, which is possibility 2 we introduced in the introduction, which would be this case, both A and B have to be true. since she works in a bank and is in an activist group. However, first possibility, that Alice only works in a bank, could also be covered by this case, where only A is true and B is false, since it is possible for her to work at a bank and not be in an activist group. We can also visualize this using a Venn diagram, where the first circle represents Alice being in an activist group, and the second circle represents Alice working at a bank. What we see now is that combination of propositions that Alice works at a bank and is in an activist group is this intermediate slice, while the possibility for Alice to only work at a bank and not be in an activist group is this part. And the statement that Alice works at a bank without specifying if she is in an activist group or not is the whole circle here. What we see now is that Alice working at a bank is necessarily a bigger set than Alice working at a bank and being in an activist group, since this is a limitation of the case that Alice works at a bank. It is not possible for her to work at a bank and be in an activist group and not work at a bank. It is a logical contradiction. So with this, we can answer the question we asked in the beginning. It is more likely for Alice to work at a bank than it is for her to work at a bank and be in an activist group. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for future videos.